The summit ended before the first royal guest had even taken a seat. King Charles had arrived at Balmoral, prepared to confront the most dangerous family dispute of his reign. But the moment he saw Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, standing beside the entrance, his expression hardened. Within minutes, the king cancelled the entire gathering and refused to explain why. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles stepped from the car, and everyone behind him immediately froze. William, Catherine, Anne, Edward, Camilla, and senior advisors had been summoned to settle a dispute over royal access, private influence, and the boundary between family loyalty and crown authority. The summit was meant to settle it. Instead, the king saw Tom at the doorway, turned to his equerry, and said, "Cancel it." Everyone leaves. Camilla moved first. She crossed the gravel, reached her husband, and said her son was there only to support her. The queen consort knew what Balmoral represented. The Scottish estate had long been where the family faced difficult truths away from London, cameras, and public ceremony. Cancelling a gathering there was not a delay. It was a declaration that trust had broken. Charles removed his gloves slowly and looked at her. He did not shout or accuse Tom. He simply asked, who gave him permission to enter? The question landed harder than anger, because every invited name had been approved. A Balmoral summit, meaning a private royal meeting at the monarch's Scottish residence, was controlled carefully, because its decisions could shape the monarchy's future. A senior courtier opened the official guest list and felt his face tighten. Tom's name had been added less than an hour earlier through an instruction linked to Camilla's household, bypassing the king's office. The courtier showed Charles the entry, and the monarch understood that someone had tested whether royal procedure could be bent without his consent. Then Charles noticed the folder. Tom held a slim leather case stamped with a private Balmoral seal used on restricted archive material. The Royal Archive, the protected collection of private letters, records, and official papers, was not a place from which documents simply wandered. The king's anger disappeared. Alarm replaced it. William watched from several steps away and saw the change. His father was no longer confronting an uninvited relative. He was staring at evidence that Tom may already know something never meant to leave the palace. The doors of Balmoral closed, the royal cars remained outside, and one question followed everyone into the silence. What was inside the folder that made a king abandon his own summit? Behind the cancelled summit stood three people trapped between family loyalty and royal duty. Charles saw a boundary being crossed, Camilla saw her son being humiliated, and Tom found himself holding information powerful enough to disturb the crown. What appeared to be a disagreement at a doorway was really the collision of two families, and neither side was willing to retreat quietly. Camilla sat alone in a Balmoral drawing room, gripping the arm of a chair as if letting go would expose everything she was trying to contain. Tom Parker Bowles remained close, listening as his mother said Charles had made them look like intruders inside a home where she had spent years standing beside him. Her son was connected to the queen consort by blood, but he held no constitutional role, meaning he had no official power, royal rank, or automatic right to enter meetings where crown decisions were made. Tom tried to calm her, but the humiliation had already cut too deeply. He reminded Camilla that he had not forced his way inside, and had come only because she asked him. She answered that the summit had been designed to place her future on trial. The meeting was not simply about schedules or rooms. It concerned who could influence royal decisions, who could access private records, and what protection her household would retain as William moved closer to the throne. Charles entered without warning and closed the door behind him. He told Camilla the summit concerned the crown, not private family comfort. The crown meant the official authority and duties of the monarchy, separate from personal relationships, and he could not allow affection to decide who entered its most sensitive discussions. She stared at him, wounded, then said she invited Tom because she no longer trusted the room to treat her fairly. The king's expression tightened. As a husband, he understood why every restriction placed on her children felt personal. As monarch, He knew allowing unofficial relatives into confidential meetings could weaken the boundary protecting William's future reign. Camilla asked whether he had already decided her place before summoning her to Scotland. He did not answer directly, and that silence frightened her more than anger. Tom finally placed the leather folder on a nearby table. He revealed through a documented account prepared for Camilla that he had not traveled merely to support her. She had asked him to bring copies of correspondence concerning changes Charles was considering for her household, ceremonial privileges, and access to royal properties. Ceremonial privileges were the formal honors, appearances, and positions granted during official royal events. Losing them would not only reduce her public role, it would signal that her influence was already being withdrawn. Elsewhere, William quietly questioned an aide about the folder. The prince learned that one paper may contain notes from a private conversation between Charles and Anne. Notes Camilla had never been meant to see. Catherine watched the monarch avoid looking toward the documents and understood the danger. Those pages threatened more than the Queen's position. They could expose a decision he had delayed announcing. To understand why those papers carried such danger, the family would have to return to the ceremony, where Charles first realized that private influence had begun entering official royal space. The crisis at Balmoral did not begin in Scotland. It began beneath the chandeliers of Buckingham Palace 6 weeks earlier. During a ceremony meant to honor decades of public service, one unexpected instruction altered the seating plan, embarrassed Princess Anne, and forced Charles to confront a truth he had avoided for too long. Someone close to Camilla was influencing royal decisions without his approval. Anne entered the reception expecting the usual order, but one small card changed everything. Her assigned place beside Charles had been moved several seats away, while a position near Camilla had been reserved for Tom Parker Bowles. Royal ceremonial seating, the formal arrangement of guests according to rank, duty, and purpose, was never casual. A changed chair could signal changed power, and everyone in that room understood the message. The Princess Royal did not complain. She lifted the place card, crossed the room, and placed it beside her brother's hand. "You should ask who believes they can rearrange the crown," she said quietly. Charles looked down at the card, then toward Camilla. The Queen Consort remained composed, but her silence deepened his unease, because tensions had already been growing around her wish to involve trusted advisors and family members in decisions about her schedule, residences, public appearances, and legacy. Tom stayed near his mother, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. He held no official royal position, yet his reserved seat suggested someone wanted his presence to appear normal. Camilla later told Charles in a recorded private conversation that she had not intended to insult Anne. She insisted her son had been included only as personal support. But the king knew the issue went far beyond one reception. If private affection could quietly alter ceremonial order, then it could also influence more serious decisions. Charles demanded the original seating instruction that same evening. A palace official brought him the document, and his expression changed when he saw the wording. The revised order had come through Camilla's private office and was written as though the monarch had personally approved it. He had not. That false appearance of consent mattered because the sovereign's approval gives weight to decisions throughout the royal household. The danger grew sharper when a recorded internal note was placed before him. It linked the seating change to a wider proposal that would grant members of Camilla's family greater access to private events, confidential papers, and selected residences after his reign. The phrase "after his reign" struck hardest. This was no longer about comfort during Charles's lifetime. It was an attempt to shape William's future monarchy before the prince had agreed to anything. Anne watched her brother read the note twice. She saw sorrow replace anger because he understood what the proposal threatened. His marriage on one side, his duty to the crown on the other. Camilla later received copies of those confidential discussions through an unknown source, and Tom arrived at Balmoral carrying the evidence. When Charles finally demanded the folder, the confrontation moved away from the doorway and into a locked room where husband and wife could no longer hide behind ceremony. The argument that followed was not loud, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. With no cameras, no waiting crowd, and no ceremonial smiles to protect them. Charles faced Camilla across a locked Balmoral study. Tom stood between them holding the leather folder. Then the king extended one hand and issued the command that changed the marriage forever. "Give it to me." Charles remained behind the writing desk, his expression controlled but hard. Camilla stood near the closed door, while Tom held the folder tightly against his chest. Two aides waited outside, knowing the study had become the center of a crisis. The papers inside proposed new restrictions on private crown discussions, internal briefings, and royal residences. Crown discussions meant confidential meetings where decisions affecting the monarchy were made, while internal briefings were private reports prepared only for authorized members of the household. Tom looked at the king and answered before his mother could stop him. He said Camilla had given him the documents because she believed her future was being decided without allowing her to defend herself. The explanation did not calm Charles. It confirmed his fear that confidential material had moved beyond official hands and into a family dispute. Camilla stepped forward, anger finally breaking through her restraint. She accused her husband of allowing William and Anne to isolate her, reduce her influence, and treat her household like a danger. The queen consort said she had spent years standing beside him, yet now learned that decisions about her role were being discussed in rooms she could not enter. Charles did not move. He told her the issue was not affection, loyalty, or whether she was accepted by the family. The issue was whether her relatives could enter spaces reserved for people serving the monarchy. Royal residences were not simply family homes. Some contained protected offices, archives, and secure rooms used for state and household business. Once those boundaries disappeared, private loyalty could begin shaping public authority. The king opened the folder and turned each page slowly. Then he stopped. An additional draft statement sat between the familiar documents, and Charles knew immediately that he had never approved it. The page suggested Camilla's household could retain influence over selected royal properties even during William's future reign. That single sentence reached beyond his marriage and into the authority of the next sovereign. Tom stepped back and insisted he had not written the page or placed it inside the folder. Camilla's face changed before she could hide it. She recognized the wording. Charles asked who had prepared it, but she refused to answer. Her silence became an answer of its own. The monarch placed the page flat on the desk and rang for his private secretary. A private secretary is the senior advisor who manages the sovereign's official work and most sensitive instructions. When the door opened, Charles ordered a full investigation into every direction issued in Camilla's name during the previous 6 months. The confrontation had exposed the document, but the greater danger now rested with whoever possessed enough access to draft a future for the crown without the king's consent. Power inside a monarchy rarely announces itself with a raised voice. It moves through schedules, signatures, private audiences, and the person trusted to stand closest when a decision is made. As Charles searched for the source of the secret proposal, William and Anne formed a quiet alliance, not to remove Camilla, but to prevent personal loyalty from becoming permanent royal authority. William entered the study after midnight and found his father sitting alone with the disputed page in his hands. Charles folded it slowly, then admitted that he no longer knew which instructions had genuinely come from Camilla and which had been issued by people using her name. The confession carried real danger. As sovereign, the king held legal and institutional authority, but major household decisions still depended on private secretaries, property arrangements, security teams, and the cooperation of senior working royals. The prince chose his words carefully. He told Charles that protecting the queen did not require surrendering the boundaries of the crown. A working royal is a family member who performs official duties on behalf of the monarch, and that role brings access, influence, and responsibility. Camilla's relatives held no such position. William knew his father would hear the warning as advice, but also as an accusation that he had allowed the problem to grow. Charles looked away. He had spent years defending his wife from public hostility, and now every restriction risked feeling like another rejection. Yet the king also understood that affection could not become inherited authority. William represented the monarchy's future, and any arrangement made now could limit the freedom of the next reign before it had even begun. Anne entered carrying a documented security record and placed it beside the disputed page. The Princess Royal had decades of service, deep institutional memory, and a reputation for placing duty above personal comfort. She showed her brother 3 private meetings added to Camilla's calendar under misleading descriptions. One had included an advisor connected to post-reign property planning, the process of deciding how royal homes and official resources would be managed after Charles was no longer sovereign. The evidence tightened around them. Anne produced notes recovered from the file linked to the Buckingham Palace seating incident. The handwriting matched the disputed proposal. The same phrases appeared in both documents, proving that the changed chair, the secret meetings, and the future property plan were not separate mistakes. They belonged to one hidden effort. William watched his father absorb the truth. The prince did not demand punishment, and Anne did not ask for Camilla's removal. Their alliance rested on something colder and more necessary. No private household could be allowed to write rules for the crown. Charles finally reached for a fresh sheet of paper. He declared that the cancelled summit would not be rescheduled. Instead, the king prepared separate written orders redefining Camilla's household, suspending questionable access, and excluding Tom from every internal royal discussion. By morning, the investigation had become a decision, and Camilla was about to discover that the closed Balmoral door was only the first privilege she had lost. At 7 the next morning, 3 sealed envelopes were placed beside the untouched breakfast settings. One was addressed to Camilla, one to Tom, and one to the senior household staff. No public announcement had been made, yet the consequences were already moving through Balmoral. Charles had transformed his anger into written authority, and everyone understood that ink would be harder to reverse than emotion. Tom opened his letter near the cold fireplace and read every line without speaking. The first order barred all unofficial relatives from attending private crown meetings, receiving internal papers, or entering restricted residential areas without direct written approval from the sovereign's office. That office was the king's central authority for controlling access, instructions, and sensitive royal business. When he reached the sentence suspending his Balmoral access, his face tightened. He folded the page and quietly told his mother he would leave immediately. Camilla tore open her own envelope with shaking hands. The second order placed her private household under temporary control, requiring all appointments, document requests, and ceremonial recommendations to pass through Charles's central office. A ceremonial recommendation was a formal suggestion about royal appearances, seating, honors, or duties. The queen consort then found the names of 2 long-trusted advisors placed on leave, and the pain in her expression turned sharply into anger. Charles entered before she could call for him. Camilla held up the letter and asked whether he truly believed she had deliberately betrayed him. The king did not answer with accusation. He told her that trust could not survive without boundaries, and those boundaries had already been crossed. She reminded him of the years she had spent defending his decisions and standing beside him through public rejection. He replied that loyalty could not erase the danger of private influence entering official power. The evidence made the silence heavier. Senior staff received electronic access records placing one of Camilla's advisors inside a restricted archive room on the night the confidential notes were copied. A restricted archive was a protected area holding private correspondence, official records, and material available only to authorized people. The entry log showed the advisor had remained there for 19 minutes without a recorded request. Tom found William before leaving and spoke to him away from the others. He said the disputed future property page was already inside the folder when Camilla handed it over. The son insisted he had never read it before reaching Balmoral. William immediately understood the implication. Someone may have wanted Charles to discover the page, cancel the summit, and react in front of the entire family. Camilla watched her son's car disappear beyond the gates, and felt the cost of the king's decision become painfully real. She turned back toward Charles, no longer speaking as queen, or defending her household. She asked for one private meeting, as the woman who had stood beside him for decades. With advisors removed and family loyalties stripped away, Charles and Camilla were left alone, to decide whether their marriage could survive the decision required to protect the monarchy. For the first time since the crisis began, there were no aides, no documents, and no titles between them. Charles and Camilla met in a small Balmoral sitting room, while the rest of the household kept its distance. She was no longer defending an office, and he was no longer speaking through orders. What followed was the private truth neither had been willing to admit. Charles closed the door himself and left the table between them empty. He did not bring the disputed folder, the written orders, or a private secretary to record the exchange. A private secretary is the senior official who manages the sovereign's work and most sensitive instructions. But this conversation belonged only to husband and wife. The king asked one question. Why had she believed Tom needed to attend the summit? Camilla lowered her eyes before answering. She admitted that she feared the meeting would decide her future role, residence, and dignity without allowing her to speak. Charles's health had made succession planning more urgent, while William's growing responsibilities meant the palace was already preparing for the next reign. Succession planning is the private process of arranging how duties, authority, and royal households will pass to the future sovereign. To her, every quiet discussion felt like another step toward removal. The queen consort confessed that she allowed her son to carry the folder because she trusted family more than officials. She believed Tom would protect the papers and protect her. Charles answered that this choice placed him inside a conflict he had no authority to resolve. Her son could love his mother, defend her, and fear for her future, but he could not carry confidential plans into a crown meeting without becoming part of the danger. Charles finally admitted his own failure. By avoiding difficult conversations, he had allowed Camilla to believe she was being pushed aside in silence. He reached for her hand, but his voice remained firm. Affection could explain what happened. It could not erase it. Camilla then identified the advisor in a recorded private account prepared for the investigation. She confirmed that he had drafted the unauthorized proposal and that she rejected its most extreme terms. Yet she kept the papers because she feared losing all influence once William became king. The future monarch would control his own household, residences, and official decisions, and no agreement made now could bind him without weakening his authority. The king revealed that his real plan had never sought to humiliate her. It guaranteed her personal security, residence, and dignity, while preventing any private household from controlling the next sovereign. Camilla understood at last that protection and power were not the same thing. She agreed to surrender every disputed paper, dismiss the responsible advisor, and publicly support the new boundaries. Her only condition was that Tom would not be blamed for a plan he did not create. Charles accepted. Their marriage had survived the private reckoning, but the monarchy still needed a public explanation for the cancelled summit, and the image of a queen's son turned away from Balmoral. By midday, the image had traveled far beyond Balmoral. Tom Parker Bowles beside the entrance, Charles frozen several steps away, and Camilla caught between them. Britain did not know what had been said inside, but it understood the symbolism immediately. A closed royal door had become a national argument about family, privilege, loyalty, and who truly belonged inside the machinery of the crown. William read the final palace statement before release, and stopped at one sentence. It described Tom's arrival, in language that would have made him look reckless and calculating. The prince crossed it out. Catherine noticed his hesitation, and quietly reminded him that protecting the institution did not require destroying a person. A palace statement is an official public message issued in the monarch's name, and every word matters because it shapes how the public understands royal decisions. The palace confirmed only that the Balmoral summit had been cancelled after an unauthorized attendee appeared at a restricted family meeting. It avoided mentioning the leather folder, the copied notes, or the investigation. Senior staff presented the new orders as a formal clarification, separating private relatives from constitutional and household responsibilities. Constitutional responsibilities are duties connected to the sovereign's public and legal role, while household responsibilities involve the staff, residences, and official work supporting that role. Camilla listened in silence as the statement was broadcast. The presenter said her household had accepted the restrictions and would cooperate fully with the review. The queen consort closed her eyes. She knew the words were careful and fair, yet they turned a private agreement into a public surrender. Charles watched her reaction from across the room and understood that even necessary protection could still feel like loss. Outside Buckingham Palace, the story became something the public could hold in one image. A crowd gathered beneath a newspaper front page showing Balmoral's closed gates under the headline, "The King Draws the Line." Some people saw strength. Others saw a marriage wounded by duty. The moment mattered because Britain was no longer debating only whether Tom should have entered the meeting. It was debating whether any private relative should ever gain influence over the future crown. A national broadcaster described the decision as the clearest boundary Charles had ever placed between his marriage and his monarchy. That framing shifted attention away from family gossip and toward William's future authority. The next sovereign would inherit not only titles and duties, but also the power to shape his own household without promises made by the previous reign. William heard the broadcast and remained uneasy. Catherine reminded him that restraint had prevented Tom from becoming the public villain of a plan he did not create. The future king accepted that mercy had protected both the man and the monarchy. That evening, Charles sat alone and prepared one final handwritten statement for his family. In it, he named who was responsible, confirmed what had been decided, and explained why the cancelled summit would never be reconvened. The world had witnessed the boundary being drawn. Now Charles had to deliver the final verdict to the people whose loyalty, fear, and silence had brought the monarchy to Balmoral's door. The Balmoral summit never took place, yet its purpose was ultimately fulfilled. Charles had summoned his family to decide where private loyalty ended and royal responsibility began. The answer came not around a conference table, but at a doorway. By canceling the meeting, confronting Camilla, and limiting her son's access, the king made the most personal decision of his reign, and accepted its painful cost. Charles gathered William, Catherine, Anne, Edward, and Camilla inside the Balmoral library. No advisors stood between them. The monarch unfolded a handwritten statement and confirmed that no unofficial relative would ever participate in crown decisions, regardless of personal closeness to the sovereign. Crown decisions are choices connected to the monarchy's official authority, duties, security, and future. That distinction mattered because affection could unite a family, but it could never replace public responsibility. The king then turned toward his wife. He confirmed that Camilla would retain her dignity, personal residence protections, ceremonial role, and place beside him. A ceremonial role means the formal duties and appearances performed on behalf of the monarchy. Yet her private household would hold no authority capable of restricting William's future reign. The prince listened without triumph, because he understood the cost behind every word. Charles told the queen that his action had never been a rejection of Tom. It was an acknowledgement that her son should not have been placed where family devotion could be mistaken for royal power. Camilla accepted responsibility for inviting him and for withholding the unauthorized proposal. She did not ask for the restrictions to be removed. Instead, she asked Anne, Edward, Catherine, and William to judge Tom by his loyalty as a son, not by the ambition of an advisor. The investigation delivered its final conclusion through a documented internal report. Camilla's former advisor had drafted the future property proposal, manipulated meeting arrangements, and copied restricted notes to pressure the king before Balmoral. Charles permanently dismissed the official from royal service. The queen accepted the decision because defending him now would have reopened the wound she had agreed to close. Tom returned every copied document and signed a written acknowledgement confirming that he would neither request nor accept access to internal royal affairs. Charles later spoke to him privately and promised that their personal family relationship could continue beyond official crown business. Her son remained family, but he would never again be placed inside the machinery of royal authority. The cancelled summit became a defining moment because the king finally separated love from power. Camilla remained his wife and queen. Tom remained her son. William's future sovereignty remained protected. No one received everything they wanted, But each person left Balmoral knowing exactly where they stood. Balmoral's doors eventually reopened, but the boundary drawn outside them remained permanent. Family could stand beside the crown, love it, and even sacrifice for it. But no private bond would ever be allowed to control it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.